Kant's theory of ethics is based entirely around the idea that immorality is irrational and inconsistent, and the theory is his development of a moral system that weeds out immoral actions from human behavior. This system is called categorical imperative, which I will discuss later. To him, moral rules are formed through rationality and stem from logic. This makes actions that seem as bad irrational. From Kant's view, something is good if it stems from the goodwill, which is good in itself. Brings me to my next point, back to categorical imperative. A perfectly rational act that every person should do because of the duty of act is rationality, which is moral. From Kant's perspective, he sees motivations and behaviors as maxims, which are the rules that govern behavior. They represent the rule of, when I am in this circumstance, I must do X. And these things are what are imported from the categorical imperative. There are a few key steps to decide if a maxim is perfectly rational. These are the universality, humanity, and universal legislator principles. Universality says, to act only in accordance with that maxim, that will become a universal law of nature without contradiction. This means that you're seeing if an action can be applied to every situation. For example, if you think that something Angel did is wrong to lie, then you also must think that it's wrong for everyone else to lie in a similar situation. Humanity says to act in such a way that is to treat people, oneself, and others as an end in themselves and never as a mere means, which means to not use someone as a tool or ignoring someone's well being or moral claims. Lastly, universal legislator says to act as though you will could become a legislator of universal laws. Another way to say this is if you can do this, then so can other people. Objection to this theory is the problem of specification, which refers to the maximum construction. Imagine for me, if you will, someone is coming up with a maxim to see if it can be perfectly rational. What happens if that person comes up with a maxim that's so specific it only applies to them? This counters Kant's goal of making a universal law that applies to everyone, because he never really placed any real guidelines in making a maxim. Another objection to this theory is the problem of counterintuitive results. Someone who addresses this objection would be Benjamin Constant, a French political activist and philosopher who came up with the murder in the door scenario as a way to criticize his theory. The idea states, after letting a friend hide in your house, and when a murderer comes into your house and asks if the friend is inside, it is likely that he will kill your friend. You have to choose between telling the murderer your friend is upstairs and risk their death, or you could lie and hopefully save your friend's life. This scenario is meant to address if it is morally acceptable to lie, if it leads to the risk of leading to someone else to potential danger. Under Kant's moral system, you'd have to choose to tell the murderer the truth, because the rules are exceptionless and universal. Because of this, Constant thought this was a fundamental flaw in the theory and weakened it. However, there is a response to this objection, coming from Kant himself. He does agree that Constant, that following the categorical imperative, he would have to tell the murderer the truth. But he brings up the point that strengthens this. He states how the moral actions don't derive from lack of contradiction and adhere to duty and rationality, and lying does the opposite. There's also the fact that consequences are too difficult to predict, and basing moral worth on the outcome would not be rational. There are also too many outcomes to this specific situation to judge on consequence, and adhering to the category imperative is the only way to avoid contradiction because, as Kant said, at the end of the day, you can only control your behavior and your will.